The banquet hall of Alecrest Pack had been decorated with white jasmine and silver ribbon, the kind of effort that took servants 3 days and cost more than most families earned in a season. Seraphine stood near the far wall with her son balanced on her hip, watching her husband prepare to speak. Kalen was 2 years old, his dark curls pressed against her shoulder, his small fist clutching the fabric of her dress the way he always did when there were too many strangers in a room. She had dressed carefully tonight. The deep green gown that Karan had once said made her eyes look like forest light. The pendant he had given her on their bonding night, a small opal set in iron, plain by noble standards but precious because he had forged the setting himself. She had even braided her hair in the old style, the way she had worn it the night they were matched. She wanted to look like his wife, because somewhere in the back of her mind, in the place where instinct lived and logic could not reach, Seraphine already knew what was coming. The hall was filled with every ranking member of the Alecrest Pack. Elders in their carved chairs, warriors along the walls with their arms crossed, Omega mothers clustered near the hearth, their children playing at their feet. This was supposed to be a celebration. Corin had called the gathering to mark the 3rd year of his leadership as Alpha, a milestone that traditionally honored the strength of the pack and the bond of the ruling pair. Seraphine had helped plan the menu. She had chosen the flowers. She had rehearsed a short speech about gratitude and partnership, folded neatly in the pocket of her gown, waiting for the moment Corin would invite her to stand beside him as he always did at formal events. He did not invite her. Instead, Corin stepped onto the raised platform at the head of the hall and raised his hand for silence. The room obeyed instantly. He had that kind of authority, the sort that did not need volume, only presence. Seraphine had loved that about him once, the quiet command. The way a room rearranged itself around him without being asked. Tonight, his presence felt different, charged. His jaw was tight, and his gaze swept the crowd without once landing on her. 3 years ago, Corin began, his voice carrying to every corner. I accepted the role of Alpha with a promise to lead this pack with honesty. Tonight, I intend to honor that promise, even though what I have to say will not be easy to hear. Seraphine's arms tightened around Kalen. The boy murmured in protest. Many of you know that before I took the bond with Seraphine, there was someone else. Someone I cared for deeply, who left Alecrest before I became Alpha. The silence in the hall changed texture. It thickened. Seraphine could feel the weight of every pair of eyes in the room shifting between her and her husband. Nadia has returned. The name dropped into the room like a stone into still water. Seraphine watched the ripples cross every face. The elders exchanged glances. The warriors shifted on their feet. And the Omega mothers near the hearth turned to look at Seraphine with expressions she recognized immediately. Pity. They already knew. Some of them, at least. The whispers she had dismissed over the past few weeks. The late meetings Karan had explained away. The scent on his jacket that she had told herself was nothing. They had all known before she did. Nadia and I have spoken at length, Corin continued, and his voice had taken on a quality Seraphine had never heard before. Softness, reverence, the way someone speaks about something sacred. We have both come to understand that what we shared was not simply youthful attachment. It was something deeper. Something that I tried to replace but never could. Replace. The word hit Seraphine like a closed fist. She was the replacement. 2 years of marriage, a child, a life built on shared meals and quiet evenings and the slow, patient work of learning another person's heart. And he had just called all of it a substitution. I am not asking the pack to accept this overnight, Corin said, but I owe you the truth. Nadia will be staying at Alecrest. She will have a place in my household. And in time, I hope you will come to see what I see. That this is not a betrayal of our values, but a return to something that should never have been interrupted. Seraphine's vision blurred. She blinked hard, refusing to let a single tear fall in front of 300 wolves, who were already measuring her reaction. Her speech about gratitude and partnership sat in her pocket like a cruel joke. Corin finally looked at her. Across the entire length of the hall, over the heads of their pack, past the jasmine and the silver ribbon she had chosen, he looked at his wife. And in his eyes she saw it clearly. Guilt. Not love. Not regret at what he was doing. Guilt at being caught between what he wanted and what he had settled for. Kaelin began to cry, the small, hiccuping sobs of a toddler who could feel his mother's heartbeat racing against his cheek. Seraphine bounced him gently, automatically, the way she had done 1,000 times. Her body knew how to comfort her son even while her mind was shattering. She did not make a scene. She did not scream or weep or confront him in front of the pack. She simply turned, pressed her lips to Kaelin's hair and walked toward the side door of the hall. No one stopped her. She heard Corin's voice falter behind her, heard him say her name once, not loudly, not with urgency, but with the tired tone of a man who had expected this reaction and had already decided it was a price worth paying. Seraphine closed the door behind her and kept walking. She made it to the corridor outside their chambers before her legs gave out. She slid down the stone wall with Kaelin still pressed to her chest, her back against the cold rock, her breathing coming in short, ragged pulls that she fought to keep silent. Kaelin had stopped crying. He was watching her face with those dark eyes that looked so much like his father's, and the resemblance carved through her worse than anything Corin had said in that hall. Her hand moved to her lower belly. Beneath the green gown, beneath the careful composure she had maintained in front of 300 witnesses, a second heartbeat flickered. Tiny. Fragile. 8 weeks along, confirmed by the pack healer just 4 days ago. She had been waiting for tonight to tell him. After the banquet, after the speeches, in the quiet of their room where she had imagined his hands on her stomach and his forehead pressed to hers. She had pictured his expression, the stunned joy, the protective fierceness, the way he would pull her close and whisper promises against her hair. Instead, she sat on a cold floor with his promises rotting in the air around her. She had not told anyone, not the healer, beyond the clinical confirmation. Not a single soul in this pack knew that the Alpha's Omega carried his second child, while he stood in a decorated hall and announced that his heart belonged to someone else. Seraphine pressed her palm flat against the place where new life grew and made a decision with the clarity that only comes when every illusion has been stripped away. She would not beg. She would not compete with a ghost who had come back wearing flesh. And she would not raise her children in a house where their mother was a consolation prize. She packed in silence while Kaelin slept. 1 bag. 2 changes of clothes for her. 3 for the boy, because he outgrew things weekly. The opal pendant she left on the dresser. She considered leaving a note and decided against it. What was there to say that every soul in that hall had not already heard? The only thing she took that was not practical was a small wooden wolf Coran had carved for Kaelin the week he was born. Not for sentiment. For her son, who would one day ask about his father, and who deserved at least one object that proved the man had once been capable of tenderness. Seraphine moved through the service corridors she had learned during her first year at Alecrest, back when she was a new Omega bride trying to memorize the layout of a home that had never quite felt like hers. The kitchens were empty, the laundry rooms dark. Every soul in the compound was either still in the banquet hall or gathered in clusters dissecting what the Alpha had just announced. She reached the eastern gate, the one used by supply wagons, unmanned tonight because all available guards had been assigned to the celebration. She shifted Kaelin to her other hip, adjusted the bag on her shoulder, and stepped through. The night air hit her like cold water. Spring had not yet reached the highlands around Alecrest, and the wind carried the bite of lingering frost. Kaelin stirred against her neck, and she pulled the blanket tighter around him. She did not look back. She had read once that the compulsion to look back was the body's way of asking for permission to stay. Seraphine was done asking for permission. The road away from Alecrest wound downhill through dense forest before splitting at the river bridge, north toward the trade towns, south toward the villages that survived on fishing and silence. She went south. People who lived quiet lives did not ask loud questions. Behind her, in the banquet hall she could no longer see, Corin had finished his speech. He was scanning the room for his wife, expecting to find her in the place she always stood. Expecting her wounded patience, her quiet dignity, her willingness to absorb the blow and carry on. He found empty space, and for the first time that evening, something other than certainty crossed the Alpha's face. 5 months had passed since Seraphine walked through the eastern gate of Alecrest with a sleeping child on her hip and a second one growing beneath her ribs. The fishing village of Dunhallow sat on a rocky stretch of southern coastline, where the sea was gray more often than blue, and the wind never fully stopped. It was the kind of place that did not appear on maps sold to travelers, which was precisely why she had chosen it. She had introduced herself as Wren, a young mother, recently widowed, looking for somewhere safe to raise her boy. The village elder, a weathered woman named Orla, had studied her face for a long time before offering her the empty cottage at the end of the harbor road. The previous occupant had died the winter before, and no one had claimed it. "Can you work?" Orla had asked. "I can mend nets, I can cook, and I know herbs well enough to treat most things that do not require a surgeon." That had been enough. Dunhallow did not have a healer, and the nearest doctor was 2 hours by cart over bad roads. Within a month, Seraphine had become essential. She treated fevers and set bones and brewed tonics for the fishermen's wives who could not sleep. She delivered a breech baby in a rainstorm and saved the blacksmith's hand after a forge burn turned septic. Kalen thrived in the salt air. He toddled along the harbor wall chasing gulls, speaking in the fragmented sentences of a child assembling language from scraps. The village women fussed over him, fed him biscuits, called him little fish. He did not ask about his father. He was too young to understand that a father was something you could lose. Seraphine's belly grew round and heavy through the summer. The village accepted this with the matter-of-fact sympathy reserved for pregnant widows. No one pressed for details about the dead husband. Grief was common in coastal towns. The sea took people, and those left behind learned not to ask how. But at night, when Kalen was asleep and the cottage was dark, and the only sound was the tide dragging stones along the shore, Seraphine felt it. The pull. It lived beneath her sternum like a hook embedded in muscle. Some nights it was faint, a distant hum she could almost ignore. Other nights it pulled so hard she gasped, pressing her hand to her chest as though she could physically hold herself in place. The bond. The mate bond she shared with Quran, the one forged the night they were matched by the elders and sealed with mutual claiming bites. It should have weakened with distance. Every text she had ever read about severed pairs said the same thing. Separation dulled the connection until it faded to nothing, a scar without sensation. Hers had not faded. If anything, it had sharpened. She could feel direction now. A compass needle embedded in her ribs pointing northeast toward Alecrest, and sometimes, in the thin hours before dawn, she felt surges of emotion that were not her own. Rage so hot it made her skin flush, anguish that brought tears she had not earned. She told herself it was pregnancy hormones. She told herself the bond was merely a biological echo, not a living thread. She told herself that a man who had stood before his entire pack and declared another woman the love of his life did not deserve the luxury of still being felt. But the pull did not care about what he deserved. It yanked and ached and whispered his name in a voice that sounded exactly like her own heartbeat. Seraphine pressed her face into her pillow and refused to answer. The traders came to Dunhallow once a month, arriving by boat with flour, salt, lamp oil, and gossip. Seraphine usually avoided them. Gossip was dangerous for a woman hiding in plain sight. But on a gray morning in late autumn, Orla found her at the herb garden behind the cottage and sat down on the stone wall with the heaviness of someone carrying news they did not want to deliver. The traders brought word from the inland packs, Orla said carefully. Seraphine's hand stilled on the rosemary she was cutting. I do not follow pack politics. This is not politics. This is madness. Orla paused. The alpha of Alecrest has lost his mind. The shears slipped. A thin line of blood opened across Seraphine's thumb. She did not feel it. They say he has turned on his own council, Orla continued. Dismissed 3 elders, stripped 2 captains of rank. His patrols have tripled, but they are not guarding the borders. They are searching. Every village, every outpost, every road between here and the northern ridge. Searching for what? For whom? A woman. His mate, the traders say, though the details are confused. Some say she was taken. Some say she fled. All anyone knows for certain is that the Alpha has put a price on information. 500 silver marks for anyone who can tell him where she went. 500 silver. More than Dunhallow earned in a year. Enough to make any honest person consider betrayal. Seraphine wiped the blood from her thumb with studied calm. Sounds like a man with poor judgment and too much power. Orla watched her for a long moment. The village elder was old, not foolish. She had taken in a young mother with no history, no people, and a belly that had grown in perfect alignment with the timeline of a mate who had lost his mind searching for someone. But Orla had also buried 2 husbands and raised 4 children alone in a village the world had forgotten. She knew what it looked like when a woman had survived something she did not want to name. The traders will be gone by noon, Orla said, standing slowly. I told them we had nothing worth reporting. She walked away without looking back. Seraphine sat in her garden with blood on her thumb and the bond in her chest pulling so hard she thought it might crack her sternum open. The baby came 3 weeks early. Seraphine labored through a November storm with the wind screaming off the sea and the cottage shutters banging against their frames. Orla served as midwife, her ancient hands steady and sure, while Kaelin slept through the chaos in the back room with the blacksmith's wife watching over him. It was a girl, small, furious, with lungs that announced her arrival to every house in the harbor. Seraphine held her daughter against her chest and felt the world narrow to the space between her own heartbeat and the infant's. She named her Leora, light in the old tongue, a name that belonged to no one in Karan's bloodline, no one in the Alecrest records, no one but this child and the mother who had carried her through exile. 2 days later, the stranger arrived. Seraphine was nursing Leora by the fire when she heard the knock. Not the familiar rap of a neighbor bringing broth. 3 deliberate strikes, evenly spaced, with the weight of authority behind them. She opened the door with Leora still cradled against her and found a woman standing on her threshold. Tall, lean, dressed in traveling leathers that had seen hard miles. Her hair was cropped short in the military style, and a long scar ran from her left temple to her jaw. But it was her eyes that stopped Seraphine cold. Amber, the unmistakable shade of a high-ranking wolf. My name is Thessaly, the woman said. I am the Alecrest Pack's second. I have been looking for you for 4 months. Seraphine's grip tightened on Leora. You have the wrong house. Seraphine, daughter of the Grey Mist line, bonded mate to Alpha Corin of Alecrest, mother of his son Kaelin, now aged 2 years and 7 months. Thessaly's voice was not unkind, but it left no room for pretense. And unless I am mistaken, mother of the child you are holding, who would be the Alpha's second heir. Seraphine considered slamming the door, calculated the distance to the back window, weighed how fast she could move with a newborn in her arms and a toddler asleep in the next room. Thessaly read every calculation on her face. I am not here to take you back, not against your will. But you need to hear what I came to say. I heard everything I needed to hear 5 months ago in a banquet hall. You heard a man making the worst mistake of his life. What you did not hear is what happened after you left. Thessaly glanced over her shoulder at the dark harbor road. May I come in? What I have to tell you should not be said on a doorstep. Against every instinct, Seraphine stepped aside. Thessaly sat at the small kitchen table and spoke without preamble. 3 days after you disappeared, Koran woke from whatever delusion had possessed him. He went to your chambers. He found the pendant on the dresser. He found the empty drawers. And he broke apart in a way I have never seen in 20 years of serving that family. He chose Nadia. He thought he chose Nadia. He believed that what he felt for her was genuine. Thessaly leaned forward. It was not. We discovered 6 weeks after the banquet that Nadia had been working with a rival pack, the Ashenmore Wolves. They had spent months feeding Karan a compound through his food, something that manipulated the bond centers in his brain, amplified old emotional memories, and suppressed his connection to his actual mate. The room tilted. Seraphine gripped the edge of the table. That is not possible. It should not be. But the Ashenmore pack has access to practitioners who operate outside traditional boundaries. We found the compound residue in his system. We found correspondence between Nadia and the Ashenmore Alpha. This was not a love story, Seraphine. It was an infiltration. Seraphine stared at the woman across from her. The bond in her chest throbbed with sudden vicious intensity, as though it had been waiting for this exact moment to scream. Why would the Ashenmore Wolves care who Karan bonds with? Because a fractured alpha is a vulnerable alpha, and a vulnerable alpha's territory is ripe for absorption. With you gone and Karan destabilized, Alecrest's borders are already being tested. 3 incursions in the last month alone. Thessaly reached into her jacket and withdrew a folded paper. This was intercepted by our border patrol 2 weeks ago. Seraphine unfolded it with numb fingers. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the seal at the bottom bore the Ashenmore crest, a black wolf over crossed bones. The message was 4 lines long. The Omega has been located. Southern coast, fishing village, east of the river mouth. Dispatch a team before the Alpha's patrols reach her. No survivors, no exceptions. Leora squirmed against her chest. In the next room, Kalen murmured in his sleep. No survivors, no exceptions. How long do I have? Seraphine's voice came out flat. Dead calm. The voice of a woman whose fear had passed through terror and arrived at something colder on the other side. Days. Perhaps less. Thessaly stood. I did not lead them here. I covered my trail carefully. But they have trackers, and they know the region. Seraphine, you cannot stay. Through the cottage window, the storm had cleared. Moonlight lay across the harbor like spilled silver. And somewhere out there, moving toward this village with orders and no intention of mercy, killers were coming for her children. The bond in her chest pulled northeast. Toward Alecrest. Toward Koran. Toward the man who had shattered her world and was now the only force powerful enough to protect what remained of it. They came on the second night. Seraphine had not slept. She had spent the hours after Thessaly's visit packing what little mattered, preparing herbs that could staunch wounds, and sharpening the fishing knife she kept beneath her pillow. Thessaly had posted herself at the harbor road with 2 wolves she had brought as escort. But 3 fighters against a dispatched kill team was not a battle plan. It was a delay. Kalen slept in his cot with his wooden wolf clutched to his chest. Leora lay in the basket beside Seraphine's bed, her breathing the only steady thing in a world that had come unstitched. The first sign was silence. The gulls that roosted on the harbor wall went quiet all at once, as though a hand had closed over their throats. Then the dogs in the village began to whine. Not bark, but whine. the sound animals make when something larger than them is moving through the dark. Seraphine was on her feet before the first howl split the night. It came from the hill above the village, a long, measured call, not a warning but a signal, coordinated, professional. The sound of wolves who hunted for prey and did not waste breath on intimidation. A second howl answered from the beach. They had come from two directions. Thessaly's voice cut through the darkness outside. They are here. 6 that I can count. Possibly more in the tree line. Seraphine gathered Leora into the sling across her chest and lifted Kalen from his cot. The boy woke groggy and confused, his arms wrapping around her neck by reflex. She was carrying both children and a fishing knife, and she had nowhere to run. The cottage door exploded inward. A wolf, the color of charcoal, lunged through the opening, its jaws wide, its eyes fixed on the woman holding 2 children. Seraphine threw herself sideways, shielding the babies with her body as the wolf's claws raked the wall where her head had been. She slashed with the fishing knife and felt it catch flesh. The wolf yelped and recoiled, the wolf stumbling back. But a second was already coming through the window, and a third behind it. Thessaly burst through the ruined doorway in wolf form, her lean gray body slamming into the second attacker with enough force to send both of them crashing through the opposite wall. The sound of their fight was savage, snarling, the crash of heavy bodies against timber, the raw fury of wolves fighting to the limit. Seraphine backed into the corner with her children. Kalen was screaming. Leora had gone silent, her tiny body rigid against her mother's chest in the primal stillness of an infant who senses mortal danger. The third wolf circled. Slower. More deliberate. This one was not rushing. It was waiting for Thessaly to be occupied, for the escorts to be engaged outside, for the moment when the Omega and her children would be completely alone. It found that moment. The wolf lunged. Seraphine had nowhere left to go. She turned her back to the attack, curling her body around both children like a shell, the blade held behind her in a grip she knew was useless against something that size. She felt heat before she felt pain. Not the heat of claws or teeth, but something rising from inside her own body, from the place beneath her sternum where the bond lived. From deeper still, from the place where her wolf had always been, quiet, patient, so subdued by years of being told that Omegas were gentle, that Omegas did not fight, that Omegas submitted. Her wolf had been listening to those voices her entire life. Tonight, with her children's blood on the line, it stopped listening. The sound that came from Seraphine's throat was not a scream, it was a howl, raw, guttural, and loaded with a frequency that rattled the windows in every cottage along the harbor. The attacking wolf skidded to a halt, its ears flattening, its body dropping low in involuntary submission. An Omega's call, the rarest and most ancient defense in wolfkind. Not a display of dominance, but something older. The sound of a mother whose young are threatened, a frequency wired into every wolf's hindbrain that triggers an override no amount of training can fully suppress. The charcoal wolf on the floor whimpered and crawled backward. The wolf facing her crouched, trembling, its attack instinct warring with something deeper and losing. But the effect was temporary. Already she could see the assassin shaking it off, its training reasserting itself, its muscles coiling for a second lunge. Then the night outside tore open. The sound was not a howl. It was a detonation. A roar so deep it vibrated in the marrow of every living thing within a mile. The attacking wolf froze. Thessaly's opponent broke and ran. The wolves outside scattered like startled birds. Something hit the ground outside the cottage with enough force to crack the stone of the harbor wall. Heavy footfalls, impossibly fast, crossing the distance from the hill to the cottage in seconds. A massive black wolf filled the destroyed doorway. Its shoulders scraped both sides of the frame. Its eyes burned amber so bright they cast light into the room like twin lanterns. The scent of battle clung to its fur, and an Ashenmoor wolf lay motionless in the street behind it. The assassin wolf that had been about to lunge at Seraphine made a sound she had never heard a wolf make, a keen, of pure, abject terror. It flattened itself against the floor, belly exposed, throat bared, every muscle locked in total submission. The black wolf pinned the assassin to the floor with one massive paw. A single low growl, and the wolf beneath it went utterly still. Then those blazing eyes turned to Seraphine. She stood in the corner of her ruined cottage, a 2-year-old screaming on her hip, a newborn silent against her chest, a blade in her white-knuckled fist, and the aftermath of violence on her dress. The black wolf lowered its massive head. It stepped toward her, each movement slow, deliberate, broadcasting harmlessness despite the violence still clinging to its fur. It stopped 3 feet away and sank to the floor, pressing its belly to the ground, its chin on its paws, its burning eyes looking up at her from below. The most powerful alpha in 4 territories, lying flat on the ground at the feet of the Omega he had driven away. Kalen stopped crying. He stared at the enormous wolf with the wide, unblinking fascination of a child who does not yet know what fear is supposed to look like. "Da?" he said. The wolf made a sound that broke the world in half. A whine so full of grief and longing and recognition that Seraphine felt it in her teeth. "Corin," she whispered. The shift rippled through him like water. One breath he was a wolf. The next he was a man kneeling on her floor, trembling, his hands pressed flat against the boards, as though he did not trust himself to reach for her. He looked up, and the alpha of Alecrest was weeping. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Thessaly appeared in the doorway, limping, her human form streaked with blood and dirt. She took one look at the scene inside. The kneeling alpha, the Omega backed into a corner with 2 children, the dead wolf on the floor, and silently withdrew, pulling the ruined door closed behind her. Seraphine found a blanket and threw it toward Coran without stepping closer. He wrapped it around his waist with hands that would not stop trembling. "Kalen," Seraphine said quietly, "look at Mama." The boy turned his face into her shoulder, still staring sideways at his father. Corin's eyes had not left his son's face. He was looking at Kalen the way a drowning man looks at the surface of the water. Then his gaze dropped to the sling across Seraphine's chest, to the tiny form nestled there, silent and watchful. His breath stopped. "Is that your daughter?" The words came out like blades. "Born only days ago. Her name is Leora. You will not know that name because you were not there." Corin made a sound like something being torn in half. His hand reached toward the baby, then stopped, hovering in the air between them as though an invisible wall had materialized. "Can I—" "No." The word landed like a slap. Corin flinched but did not withdraw his hand. It stayed there, suspended, trembling. "Seraphine, please." "Please what?" She heard her own voice rising and could not stop it. 5 months of silence and solitude and swallowed grief were flooding upward, and the dam she had built was cracking faster than she could patch it. "Please let you hold the child you did not know existed. Please let you touch the son you forgot about the night you stood in front of our entire pack and told them your heart belonged to someone else. I was not myself. You were exactly yourself." Seraphine stepped forward, and Corin actually flinched backward. "Good. Let him flinch." "Thessaly told me about the compound, about Nadia and the Ashenmoor wolves. And maybe that is true. Maybe they poured something into your food that twisted your brain and made you believe she was what you wanted." She stopped, her chest heaving, Leora stirring against her with a small mule of discomfort. "But here is what the compound did not do, Corin. It did not make you hide me for 2 years. It did not make you keep our bond quiet because you were ashamed of taking an Omega with no bloodline. It did not make you hesitate every single time someone asked if you were happy, in that way that told me you were trying to convince yourself more than them. The silence after those words was worse than the battle that had preceded them. Corin's head dropped. His hands pressed against his face, and when he spoke, his voice came from somewhere deep and gutted. You are right. Seraphine had been prepared for denial, for excuses, for the defensive armor of a man who had spent his entire life being told he was above reproach. She had not been prepared for agreement. The compound amplified what was already cracked, Karan said. Each word dragged from him like a tooth being pulled. It found the doubt I had been carrying and turned it into certainty, but the doubt was mine. I own that. He looked up, and the rawness in his face was so complete it was almost obscene, like seeing someone with their skin removed. When the elders matched us, I told myself I would learn to love you the way I had loved Nadia. That was my first failure, because love is not something you learn, it is something you recognize. And I was so consumed with comparing you to a memory that I did not see what was standing right in front of me until it was gone. Seraphine's jaw tightened. What a beautiful realization to have 5 months too late. You are angry. I am beyond angry. I am standing in a destroyed cottage at the edge of the world with 2 children and the wreckage of assassins on my floor because you could not see the difference between love and nostalgia. Corin rose to his feet. The blanket hung from his waist, and his body bore the evidence of months of unraveling, gaunt where he had been powerful, hollowed where he had been solid, dark circles beneath eyes that looked like they had forgotten how to close. I have not slept a full night since you left, he said. The bond screams at me, every hour, every minute. It tells me where you are the way a compass tells north, and for 5 months I have followed it through every false lead and dead end and empty room. And every time I got close enough to feel you clearly, the pain was so sharp I could not breathe. Good. The word was vicious, and she meant it. She wanted him to have felt every second of what she had felt. Every night nursing Kaylin alone. Every morning kneeling over a basin with pregnancy sickness while a toddler pulled at her dress and asked for breakfast. Every moment of building a life from nothing in a village that was not her home, surrounded by strangers who would never know her real name. You should have felt it, Seraphine said, her voice finally breaking. You should have felt all of it, because I felt all of it, Corin. Every single night. And I did not have the luxury of an army to send searching. I had a fishing knife, and a 2-year-old and a baby growing inside me, and I did it alone, because the man who was supposed to protect us chose a phantom over his family. Corin crossed the space between them. Seraphine did not step back. She was done retreating. He stopped inches from her, close enough that she could feel the heat coming off his skin, close enough that the bond between them roared with recognition. I did not choose her, he said, low and fierce. I was manipulated into believing I chose her. But the moment the compound cleared my system, the only name in my mouth was yours. The only face behind my eyes was yours. The only thing that kept my wolf from consuming me entirely was the thread between us that told me you were still alive. That is not enough. I know. His voice cracked. I know it is not enough. I know that no explanation will undo what you experienced in that hall. I know that you watched me break every promise I ever made to you in front of 300 people. And I know that compound or no compound, you deserved better than a man who needed to lose everything before he understood what he had. Leora began to cry, the thin, wavering cry of a newborn who had been patient long enough. Seraphine adjusted the sling automatically, her body rocking in the instinctive rhythm of a mother whose hands never stop working even when her heart is in pieces. Corin watched her comfort their daughter. Watch the practiced ease, the quiet competence, the bone-deep tenderness that she had never once failed to give their children even while he had failed to give it to her. I will spend the rest of my life earning your trust back, he said. I am not asking you to forgive me tonight. I am not asking you to come home. I am asking you to let me stand between you and the people who want to kill our children. And when the killing is done, I will ask for nothing more than the chance to prove that the man who stood in that banquet hall is not the man I am. Seraphine looked at him for a long time. The bond throbbed between them, raw and open and agonizing. She could feel his sincerity bleeding through it, could feel the depth of his regret like a wound with no bottom. But feeling and trusting were different animals entirely. You can protect us, she said finally. That is what an alpha does. But do not mistake proximity for forgiveness. You are here because my children need to survive the night. That is all you have earned. Koran's jaw tightened. He nodded once. That is enough, he said quietly. For now, that is enough. They left Dunhallow before dawn. Thessaly had secured horses from a farmstead inland, and the escort had grown. Koran's howl had summoned every Alecrest patrol within 30 miles, and by the time the sun crested the horizon, 24 wolves flanked them on the road north. Seraphine rode with Leora in the sling, and Kaelin seated in front of her, his small hands gripping the horse's mane with delighted concentration. Koran rode beside her, close enough that their horses' shoulders nearly touched, his eyes scanning every tree line and ridge with the hypervigilance of a man who had already lost everything once and would die before it happened again. They did not speak for the first hour. The silence between them was not empty. It was full, pressurized, loaded with everything that had been said and everything that had not. It was Kaelin who broke it. Mama, Big Wolf, the boy said, pointing at one of the patrol wolves loping alongside the road. Yes, sweetheart, Big Wolf. Da Big Wolf? Seraphine felt Koran's attention sharpen beside her. She kept her eyes forward. Yes, your father is a big wolf. Da come home? The question was innocent and devastating. Seraphine heard Koran's breath catch. She could feel through the bond the exact shape of the pain that question caused him, the jagged realization that his son did not know whether his father lived with them anymore. We will talk about that later, little one. Kaelin accepted this with the easy trust of a child who believes his mother has answers to everything. He went back to studying the horse's mane. Koran spoke quietly, pitched below the boy's hearing. He looks like you. He looks like both of us. His eyes, the way he watches things before reacting, that is entirely you. A pause. What did you tell him? About me? Nothing. He is too. He does not understand where we went or why. He asked for you the first week. Then he stopped asking. She did not say it to wound him. She said it because it was true, and because she had decided somewhere between the ruined cottage and this road that she would give Koran only truth from now on. Let him do with it what he could. Koran was quiet for a long time after that. Thessaly fell back to ride beside them as the road climbed into the highlands. Her expression was grim. I need to tell you both something before we reach Alecrest. Seraphine felt the temperature of the conversation drop. A messenger reached our rear guard an hour ago. The situation has changed. Thessaly kept her voice low. Nadia did not flee when her deception was uncovered. She stayed. Koran was too consumed with finding you to deal with her, and by the time anyone realized she was still maneuvering, she had half the council behind her. While Koran has been gone searching for you, she has been consolidating support among the elders who were already sympathetic to the Ashenmore alliance. Koran's hands tightened on his reins. She has no authority. She claimed it. 3 days ago, Nadia convened an emergency council. She told them you had abandoned your pack to chase a runaway Omega, and that your obsession proved you were unfit to lead. She invoked the ancient right of challenge. Seraphine went cold. Even with her limited knowledge of pack law, she knew what a right of challenge meant, a formal contest for the alpha position, a fight to submission or death. Who accepted the challenge on her behalf? Corin demanded. Fenric of Ashenmoor. He arrived at Alecrest 2 days ago with 40 wolves. He has been welcomed as a guest by the elders, Nadia turned. Fenric. The name came from Corin's mouth like something rotten. He has wanted Alecrest's territory for a decade. And now he has a legal path to take it. If you do not answer the challenge within 3 days of returning, you forfeit. Nadia becomes the ranking female. Fenric bonds with her and absorbs Alecrest into the Ashenmoor coalition. Seraphine looked at Coran. The gauntness, the sleeplessness, the months of physical and emotional destruction. He was in no condition to fight a fresh alpha who had been planning this takeover for years. He knew it too. She could feel it through the bond. Not fear, exactly. Something worse. The cold arithmetic of a man calculating whether he could survive a fight he might not be strong enough to win. There is more, Thessaly said, and her voice had dropped to something barely above a whisper. The challenge terms Nadia set are not standard. She specified blood right. Corin went still. What does blood right mean? Seraphine asked. It was Corin who answered, his voice hollow. It means the challenge is not just for the alpha position, it is for everything: territory, title, mate, children. He turned to look at her, and his eyes held something she had never seen in them before. Fear. Unguarded, unhidden fear. If I lose, Fenric claims you and our children as spoils. That is the old law. That is what Nadia said as the terms. The road stretched ahead of them toward the highlands, toward Alecrest, toward a battle that would determine whether her family survived or was consumed. Leora stirred in the sling. Kaelin hummed tunelessly, playing with the horse's mane, oblivious to the weight of what had just been spoken over his head. Seraphine looked at the man beside her. Broken, sleep-deprived, half-destroyed by his own mistakes. The man who had shattered her heart in a banquet hall. The man who had crossed a kingdom to find her. The man who might not survive what was coming. Then you cannot lose, she said. They arrived at Alecrest to find it transformed. The compound she had once walked through freely was now divided. Corin's loyalists on the western side, Nadia's faction and the Ashenmoor wolves on the eastern. Armed patrols from both sides walked the grounds with the tense courtesy of enemies who had not yet been given permission to fight. Seraphine was taken to the Alpha's private quarters, the rooms she had once shared with Coran, now stripped of her belongings and smelling of dust and absence. Someone had removed her clothes, her books, the small paintings she had hung to make the stone walls feel less cold. All that remained was furniture. Coran did not enter the rooms with her. He stood at the threshold, and the look on his face said he understood exactly what she was seeing. I will have your things found, he said. Do not bother. They are just things. He flinched at the flatness of her voice and withdrew to prepare for the challenge. The fight was set for dawn. Seraphine spent the night nursing Leora and watching Kaelin sleep, listening to the sounds of a compound preparing for violence, sharpening stones, murmured strategy, the restless pacing of wolves who knew that tomorrow would change everything. At midnight, Thessaly came to her door. Fenric has made an additional demand. He wants the challenge witnessed by the full pack, including the Omega and the heirs. He says it is tradition. He wants to intimidate Coran by making him fight in front of his family. Yes. Seraphine considered this. Fenric was not wrong. Forcing Coran to watch his mate and children on the sidelines while he fought for their lives would be a devastating distraction. It was a tactic designed to exploit the very bond that made Coran most vulnerable, unless the distraction ran in the other direction. Tell Fenric I accept, Seraphine said, but not as a spectator. Tell him I am invoking the Omega's intercession. Thessaly stared at her. That right has not been called in 200 years. Is it still law? Technically, but Seraphine, the intercession means you stand in the challenge circle. If Coran falls, You become the final barrier between Fenric and your children. You would have to face him yourself. I know what it means. You are an Omega, barely a week postpartum. You have never fought in your life. I know what I am. Seraphine met Thessaly's eyes. And I know that Karan will fight differently if he believes I am safe on the sidelines. He will fight cautiously. He will hold back because part of his mind will be protecting us instead of committing fully to the battle. Fenric is counting on that. She lifted her chin. But if I am standing in the circle behind him, if my life and my children's lives depend on the outcome with no safety net, then Karan will not hold back. He will fight like what he is, an alpha defending his family with no room for restraint. Thessaly was silent for a long moment. And if he falls? Seraphine looked at her sleeping children. Kaelin with his wooden wolf. Leora in her basket, not yet a week old, already bearing the weight of a bloodline war she did not ask for. If he falls, then Fenric will have to go through me, and I may be an Omega, and I may be barely a week postpartum, and I may have never fought in my life. But I made a sound 3 nights ago that dropped trained killers to the floor. So let Fenric come. Let him try to take my children from a mother who has nothing left to lose. Thessaly left to deliver the message. Seraphine sat in the dark with her hand on Leora's chest, feeling the baby's heartbeat under her palm, and waited for dawn. The challenge circle was drawn in ash on the packed earth of Alecrest's central ground. Every wolf in the compound ringed its edges, Corrin's loyalists on one side, the Ashenmoor coalition on the other, with the neutral elders occupying the narrow strip between. Seraphine stood inside the circle with Kaelin on her hip and Leora in the sling. The Omega's intercession placed her at the circle's northern edge, the position traditionally reserved for the thing most worth defending. She was simultaneously a participant and a prize, and the bitter symbolism was not lost on her. Corrin entered from the west. He had slept no more than an hour, but something had changed in him overnight. The gauntness remained, the shadows under his eyes, the evidence of months of destruction. But his movements had recovered a precision she recognized from the early days of their bond, when she had watched him train in the yard and thought she had never seen anything so effortlessly dangerous. He saw her standing in the circle and stopped. "Seraphine, what are you doing?" "Giving you a reason not to lose." His jaw worked. The bond between them flared with a dozen competing emotions: fury at her recklessness, terror at her proximity to danger, and beneath it all, a surge of something fierce and hot that she recognized as pride. Fenric entered from the east. He was everything Karan was not right now. Rested, fed, his body thick with muscle and confidence. He moved like a man who had already won, scanning the crowd with the proprietary gaze of a wolf measuring his new territory. His eyes landed on Seraphine, traveled down to Leora in the sling, traveled to Kaelin on her hip. "The Omega brings the pups," Fenric said, loud enough for the crowd. "How sentimental." "The Omega invokes the intercession," Seraphine replied, her voice carrying with a clarity that surprised even her. "As is her right under the old law." Fenric's smile flickered. He had not expected this. The intercession removed his leverage. There was no safe sideline for Karan to worry about, no protected family to divide his focus. Everything was inside the circle now. Everything was at stake in the most literal sense possible. "So be it," Fenric said. "When your mate falls, I will come for you next." The elder who served as arbiter raised his staff. The crowd went silent, and the challenge began. Corrin shifted first. His black wolf form erupted from his body with a force that cracked the earth beneath his feet. Fenric answered half a second later, his wolf dark brown and massive, built like a battering ram. They collided in the center of the circle with an impact that sent shockwaves through the ground. Seraphine felt it in her bones. Kaelin buried his face in her neck. Leora slept on, oblivious. The fight was not graceful. It was brutal, grinding, two apex predators tearing at each other with everything they had. Fenric was stronger. His jaws clamped onto Karan's shoulder and wrenched, and Seraphine heard the terrible sound of the wound landing. Karan staggered. The wound was deep. Through the bond, Seraphine felt his pain as clearly as if the teeth were in her own flesh. But she also felt something else. Felt him reach through the bond toward her, toward the children, drawing on their presence the way a drowning man draws on air. The pain did not disappear, but it was joined by something larger. Corin lunged. His jaws clamped onto Fenric's hind leg and wrenched it sideways. The Ashenmoor Alpha screamed, a high, wild sound that no wolf of his stature should ever make. He twisted free, but could no longer put weight on the leg. The battering ram was limping. They circled. The ash of the challenge ring was streaked dark from both wolves. The crowd had gone utterly silent. Even the Ashenmoor wolves watched with the stillness of creatures who understood they were witnessing something that would be spoken about for generations. Fenric made his final play. He feinted left, then threw his entire weight into a charge aimed not at Karan but past him, directly at Seraphine and the children. The crowd gasped, the elders shouted. This was a violation of every code the challenge circle held sacred. Karan moved faster than physics should have allowed. His body intercepted Fenric's charge with a collision that broke something in both of them. But Fenric's momentum carried them both toward the northern edge, toward Seraphine. She did not run. She did not scream. She looked down at her children, Kaylin's face pressed to her shoulder, Leora's sleeping form against her chest, and she felt the thing that had stirred in her cottage in Dunhallow rise again. Not the Omega's call this time. Something deeper. Something that had been growing inside her since the night she walked through the eastern gate with nothing but her children and her pride. The shift took her like a wave. She did not fight it. She let it come. The breaking and remaking of bone, the surge of fur through skin, the explosion of senses that turned the world from flat to infinite. Kaylin tumbled gently onto the packed earth as her arms became legs. Thessaly was there instantly, scooping up both children, pulling them clear. And where Seraphine had stood, a wolf now crouched. Silver white, smaller than either male, but burning with amber light that radiated from her fur like heat from a forge. The Omega who had never fought, the mother who had nothing left to lose. Fenric scrambled to his feet, broken and bleeding, and found himself facing not one wolf, but two. Black and silver white, side by side, their bodies touching from shoulder to flank. Mates. Bonded. Complete. The Omega's call erupted from Seraphine's wolf form. Not the raw, desperate sound she had made in Dunhallow, but something refined, controlled. A frequency that resonated through every wolf in the circle and dropped half of the Ashenmoor coalition to their knees in involuntary submission. Fenric fought it. His legs trembled, his body shook. But he fought it, snarling, dragging himself upright through sheer force of will. It did not matter. Corin was already on him. The Alpha of Alecrest hit Fenric with a force that had months of rage behind it. Months of searching. Months of broken sleep and broken bonds and broken promises. His jaws found Fenric's throat and held. Not a killing bite, a submission hold. The most absolute display of dominance in wolf kind. The loser's life held between the winner's teeth, surrendered entirely to the victor's mercy. Fenric went limp. A long, keening whine escaped his throat. Total submission. The challenge was over. Corin held the bite for 3 more heartbeats. Then he released Fenric's throat and stepped back. He turned to Seraphine. She stood in her wolf form, silver white and trembling with the aftermath of transformation, and watched her mate cross the circle toward her. He pressed his forehead to hers. Through the bond, she felt everything. His exhaustion, his relief, his pain, his love. Not the confused, comparative love he had carried before. something forged in fire and loss and the terrible clarity of almost losing everything. She pressed back, and the bond between them, strained and fractured and tested beyond anything either of them had imagined, held. Around them, the wolves of Alecrest began to howl, not a victory cry, something older, a sound of recognition, of a broken thing made whole. Fenric and the Ashenmoor wolves were escorted from Alecrest territory before sundown. The elders who had supported Nadia's faction stepped down from their positions in silence, requiring no trial. Shame was sufficient judgment. Nadia herself was brought before Koran and Seraphine in the great hall. She stood with her chin raised, defiant to the end, but her eyes were empty. The game was over, and she knew it. "You used me," Koran said to her. "You used what I felt for you as a weapon against my family." "You were easy to use," Nadia replied. "You never stopped wanting what we had. The compound only gave you permission to act on it." The words landed, and Seraphine watched Koran absorb them without flinching. He did not argue. He did not defend himself. He simply nodded. "You are right, and that is something I will carry for the rest of my life." He paused. "You are exiled. If you are found within Alecrest borders after dawn, you will be treated as a hostile." Nadia left without looking back. Seraphine watched her go and felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not pity, just the quiet relief of a closed door. In the weeks that followed, Alecrest healed the way all wounded things heal, unevenly, with setbacks and scar tissue, and days that felt harder than they should have. Koran did not move back into their chambers. Seraphine had not invited him, and he did not ask. He slept in the room adjacent, close enough that she could feel him through the bond, but far enough to respect the distance she had set. Every morning he came to hold Leora while Seraphine ate breakfast. Every evening he sat on the floor with Kaelin building towers out of wooden blocks, letting the boy knock them down and laughing each time as though it were the first. He was learning, slowly, imperfectly, with the awkward dedication of a man who understood that the right to be a father was not granted by blood, but earned by presence. One night in early winter, Seraphine opened the adjacent door. Koran was sitting on the edge of his bed, awake, staring at the wall. He looked up when she appeared. She did not say anything. She simply sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. The bond between them hummed, not with the desperate, screaming intensity of the past months, but with something quieter, warmer. The steady pulse of two people choosing each other not because fate demanded it, but because they had walked through the worst of each other and decided to stay. "I am not ready to forgive you," Seraphine said. "I know. But I would like you to come home." Koran's hand found hers. He held it the way you hold something you have broken and are learning to carry gently. "I am already home," he said. "I have been home since the moment I found you." Outside, the first snow of winter settled over Alecrest, and in the quiet of a room that smelled of cedar and salt air and the faintest trace of jasmine, two wolves sat side by side and began again.